If you think Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew is, just this quirky 16th century romantic comedy like A Simple Battle of the Sexes where a loud guy meets a loud girl and sparks fly, well, you haven't read the stage directions.
No, definitely not. It really is something completely different when you look at the raw source material.
Right, because today we're looking at a text that reads less like a romance and honestly much more like a meticulously crafted manual for psychological warfare.
It really does. I mean, when you step away from the pop culture summaries and look at the actual words on the page, you start to see all these gears turning behind the scenes.
Yeah.
This play isn't just about a rocky marriage. It's this profound, almost disturbing exploration of how human identity can be completely overwritten, if you just know how to manipulate someone's reality.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. You are joining us to look closely at the exact structure of this foundational text. We have the complete source material laid out right here.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the contents, the induction, the 5 acts, the dramatis personae, and we are going to extract the core mechanics of how this story actually operates. But before we jump into the text itself, we should probably set some ground rules for how we're approaching this.
Right. That is crucial. The material we are exploring today centers heavily on 16th century gender roles, the commodification of women in the marriage market, and, well, the mechanics of female submission.
Which are intense topics.
Very. These are highly polarized, culturally charged themes. So our objective here is completely analytical. We aren't endorsing, defending, or debating the morality of these historical viewpoints.
We're just looking at the mechanics.
Exactly. We are simply acting as impartial guides to the text, unpacking the story's structure, and examining exactly how these characters use language and performance to manipulate one another.
Right, we are just looking at what is physically on the page. And what's on the page starts with a massive curveball. I mean, the text opens with this section called the induction, and I have to admit, this is where my head just started spinning.
It throws a lot of people off.
It really does, because a lot of modern stage adaptations just cut this part entirely, which seems like a tragic mistake to me. It acts as, like, the ultimate psychological cipher for everything that happens later.
It's the key to the whole thing.
Yeah. It doesn't start in Italy. It doesn't start with wealthy nobles. It starts on a muddy patch of ground outside an English alehouse with this guy named Christopher Sly.
A completely destitute man. I mean, the dramatis personae lists Christopher Sly simply as a tinker. So a mender of pots and pans.
But he's not exactly working when we meet him.
No, he is dead drunk. He is being aggressively thrown out of a tavern by the hostess because he's, breaking glasses and refusing to pay his tab.
Just a total mess.
Right. And he's slurring his words, drunkenly boasting about his lineage, claiming his ancestors came over with Richard Conqueror. He's literally mixing up Richard the Lionheart and William the Conqueror.
Wow.
Yeah. And finally, his brain just shuts down, and he passes out cold on the bare dirt.
It's just this pathetic, incredibly raw, unglamorous scene. And into this literal mud steps a wealthy lord who is returning from a hunt with his entourage.
Right, a massive contrast.
Exactly. And they are discussing their highly bred, super expensive hunting dogs, dogs with names like Merriman, Silver, and Bellman. So the lord spots this unconscious, filthy guy on the ground, and his immediate reaction is utter disgust.
He calls him a monstrous beast.
Yeah, a monstrous beast and a swine. But here is where I really need to stop and ask a question. Because instead of just stepping over Sly or having the constable arrest him, the Lord decides to launch into what might be the most elaborate, financially ruinous practical joke ever written. Like, why? Is this just for a laugh, or is there a darker undercurrent here?
Oh, it is much darker.
Yeah.
And far more calculated than just a simple prank. The Lord looks at the unconscious Sly and asks his men this fascinating hypothetical question.
What does he ask?
He essentially asks, if we took this beggar, wrapped him in sweet clothes, put rings on his fingers, placed a delicious banquet by his bed, and surrounded him with brave attendants, when he wakes up, would he forget who he is?
Wow.
Yeah. The Lord isn't trying to make Sly look silly. He wants to see if he can completely erase a man's identity by aggressively altering his environment.
It feels like the blueprint for a virtual reality simulation or, I don't know, some kind of intense psychological experiment. If you tell someone they're someone else for long enough and you control all their sensory inputs, Do they actually start to believe it?
That's exactly the hypothesis he's testing.
And the sensory overload the Lord plans is staggering. I mean, he gives his servants instructions that read like a recipe for brainwashing. They are told to carry Sly to the best chamber, balm his foul head in warm distilled waters, and bring sweet wood to change the smell of the room.
He wants to completely overwrite Sly's reality.
Right. He even wants musicians ready so that the second Sly opens his eyes, he hears a dulcet and a heavenly sound.
Exactly. He is targeting the olfactory, auditory, and tactile senses simultaneously. And the psychological immersion is just as intense as the physical setup.
How so?
Well, the servants are commanded to stand around the bed, bowing low, speaking with absolute unwavering reverence. One holds a silver basin full of rose water, another holds an expensive suit of clothes.
Just total submission from the staff.
Right. And the rule is, if Sly speaks, they must instantly ask, "What is it your honor will command?" They are building a completely enclosed artificial reality.
And the most unhinged part of this whole setup is the wife. I mean, the Lord pulls his young male page, Bartholomew, aside and tells the servants to dress the kid up in all suits like a lady.
It's so bizarre.
It really is. This boy is going to pretend to be Christopher Sly's devoted, weeping, noble wife. And the Lord literally gives the kid acting notes. He tells him to use a soft, low tongue, to offer tempting kisses, and to cry on command about how long her husband has been sick.
And he gives him a prop for the tears, too.
Yes. The Lord throws in a practical tip, like, if the boy can't fake tears, he should hide a freshly cut onion in a napkin and hold it near his eyes.
That detail about the onion is brilliant, honestly, because it highlights the sheer mechanics of performance. It is a stage direction literally written into the dialogue.
Right.
And this is exactly why the induction is the master key to the entire text. It establishes the central premise that identity is not an innate, unbreakable truth. It is a performance.
And that a fragile one.
Yes, it is incredibly malleable. The Lord forces a new reality onto Sly through social pressure, theatrical props, and relentless repetition. And this is precisely the mechanism we are going to see deployed later on. The text is warning the audience right from the start to watch how easily reality can be bent.
But Sly doesn't just roll over immediately, right? Like when he wakes up, his initial instinct is to fight the simulation. He wakes up surrounded by these bowing servants and a fake wife, and he clings to his reality.
He tries to.
Yeah, he yells, "I am Christopher Sly, call not me honor nor lordship." He says he's by birth a peddler, by education a card maker, by transmutation a bear herd, and now by present profession a tinker.
He's listing his resume just to ground himself.
Exactly. He even tries to prove he is real by naming specific people from his hometown, like Marion Hackett, the fat alewife of Wincott, who he owes 14 pence for sheer ale. He's literally anchoring himself to his debt just to prove he exists.
It is a desperate defense mechanism.
Yeah.
But the genius of the manipulation is that the servants don't argue with him.
They don't.
No, they don't tell him he is wrong. They just pity him. They tell him he has been suffering from a lunacy, a terrible delusion, for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they offer him Apollo playing music. They describe caged nightingales. They talk about his horses trapped with gold and pearl, his soaring hawks. They even offer to bring him erotic Renaissance paintings of Adonis and Cytherea. They simply overwhelm his meager defenses with unimaginable luxury.
And he folds so incredibly fast. I mean, it takes barely 5 minutes of stage time. The smell of the sweet wood, the taste of the sack, which is like a type of fortified wine they give him, the sight of this supposed beautiful wife weeping over him.
It's just too much for him to resist.
Right. Suddenly, his entire lifelong identity just evaporates. He says, "Upon my life, I am a lord indeed, and not a tinker, nor Christopher Sly." He completely surrenders. He even asks his fake wife to come to bed with him. The brainwashing is 100% successful.
And right at the pinnacle of this successful psychological takeover, a messenger arrives. He tells the newly minted Lord Sly that his players, a troupe of traveling actors, have arrived to perform a pleasant comedy to help cure his lingering melancholy.
Convenient timing.
Very. So Sly sits down next to the page boy in a dress to watch the show. And the show those actors are about to perform is the Taming of the Shrew.
Wait, really?
Yes. The entire story of Padua, of Katherina and Petruchio, is a literal play within a play. It is a performance being put on for a man who is currently trapped in a performance orchestrated by a cruel lord.
Which is such a dizzying Inception-level narrative structure. I
Yeah.
mean, we are about to analyze a story about manipulation, knowing that the story itself is a tool being used to manipulate a guy who doesn't even know his own name anymore. It is absolutely wild.
It adds such a complex layer to everything that follows.
It really does. So with that massive framework in place, the actors step onto the stage, and we leave the muddy heath of England for the wealthy, sun-drenched streets of Padua, Italy. And what we find in Padua is that this exact same concept, controlling reality and treating identity as a game, is operating at a societal level. Only here, the game is the marriage market.
Precisely. The illusion of control isn't just about practical jokes anymore. In Padua, it is the fundamental economic engine of the aristocracy. We are introduced to Baptista Minola, an incredibly wealthy gentleman with a massive logistical problem.
His daughters.
Right, he has 2 daughters,
Yeah.
and he is managing them less like human beings and more like complex financial assets.
That is the perfect way to phrase it, honestly, because he issues an ultimatum in the public square that is essentially a market regulation. He is surrounded by men who are desperate to marry his younger daughter, Bianca, but Baptista sets a hard rule.
A total embargo.
Yeah, Bianca is completely off the market. She's legally barred from marrying until his eldest daughter, Katherina, is married off first. And this causes absolute panic among the suitors because Katherina's reputation in Padua is completely toxic.
The text immediately establishes how Katherina is viewed by her society. The men refer to her as a fiend of hell, a shrew, a woman so cursed and unruly that no man could possibly endure her.
And Katherina does nothing to dispel this reputation, does she?
No, in fact, she leans into it aggressively.
Yeah, she is openly, physically threatening them in public. In this very first scene, when a suitor named Hortensio suggests she needs to adopt a gentler, milder mold to find a husband, she explodes. She threatens to comb your noodle with a 3-legged stool and paint your face and use you like a fool.
That's a very vivid threat.
I mean, let's translate that for a second. A noodle is a head. She is promising to smash a heavy wooden stool over this guy's head until his face is covered in his own blood. It is a horrifyingly violent threat for a noble woman to make in a public square.
And her violence serves as a stark contrast to Bianca, who is performing the exact opposite role on the gender spectrum. When Baptista commands Bianca to go inside and stop causing a scene, she doesn't argue, she doesn't negotiate.
She just yields.
Immediately, she submits, saying, "Sir, to your pleasure humbly I subscribe, my books and instruments shall be in my company." She is the absolute picture of silent obedience.
And the men practically drool over it. Lucentio, who is this young student who just arrived in town, sees Bianca standing there silently and is instantly, fundamentally obsessed.
It's love at first sight, or at least he thinks it is.
Right. He tells his servant, "I burn, I pine, I perish, if I achieve not this young modest girl." And the thing is, he knows nothing about her intellect, her personality, or her beliefs. He is entirely captivated by her maid's mild behavior and sobriety. It's literally the performance of silence that he finds so intoxicating.
Which forces us to look at the mechanics of commodification in this society. Because Bianca is so highly prized by the market and Katherina is an immovable barrier blocking that market, the rival suitors for Bianca actually form a cartel.
A cartel?
Yes. 2 bitter rivals, an older, incredibly wealthy man named Cambio and a younger suitor named Hortensio, agree to pause their feud and pool their resources to find a husband for Katherina, just to clear the blockade. They are actively strategizing how to liquidate Baptista's toxic asset so they can bid on the prized one.
And that bidding war actually happens. Once the suitors mistakenly believe they have found a buyer for Katherina, they immediately corner Baptista in Act 2 to bid on Bianca. And Baptista doesn't pretend this is about love or compatibility. He acts as the ultimate broker.
He lays out his terms very clearly.
He does. He explicitly states his terms out loud to the suitors. He says, "He of both that can assure my daughter greatest dower shall have my Bianca's love. So whoever can prove they have the most capital gets the girl."
It is an auction, pure and simple. Gremio, the older suitor, goes first. And the way he lists his wealth is fascinating because it is deeply material. He doesn't offer promises of a good life. He reads an inventory list.
I have to read some of this list because the specificity is just mind-blowing. Gremio brags that his house in the city is richly furnished with plate and gold. He has hangings, all of Tyrian tapestry, which means incredibly expensive dyed fabrics.
Right, very high status.
He mentions ivory coffers stuffed with crowns, cypress chests full of expensive bed covers. He talks about having fine linen, turkey cushions bossed with pearl, pewter, and brass. And then he just pivots to his livestock.
The livestock is where he really flexes.
Yeah. He says he has 100 milch kine to the pale-meaning cows currently producing milk and 60 fat oxen standing in my stalls.
And a score is 20, so he's boasting about 120 prime oxen. It is an overwhelming display of liquid and physical assets. But his competitor in this auction is Tranio. Now, Tranio is actually a servant, but he has disguised himself as his wealthy master Lucentio to get in on the bidding.
The layers of disguise in this play are just everywhere.
Everywhere. And Tranio counterbids with aggressive real estate. He offers 3 or 4 houses in Pisa that are just as good as Gremio's, plus 2,000 ducats by the year of fruitful land.
Wait, let me stop you right there. 2,000 ducats a year from land leases. What does that actually mean in this world? Like, how big of a flex is that?
It is astronomical. A ducat was a gold or silver coin used in trade across Europe. For context, earning a few dozen ducats a year would provide a very comfortable living for a merchant. Earning 2,000 ducats annually purely from passive land ownership places him in the ultra-elite. It is the kind of wealth that destabilizes an economy.
Gremio immediately panics when he hears that number. You can just feel it. He realizes he's losing the auction, so he throws in a massive final asset. He offers an argosy, which is a massive, heavily armed merchant ship capable of international trade, currently sitting in the harbor at Marseille.
A huge investment.
But Tranio fires back that his father has 3 great argosies, 2 galleasses, which are huge, hybrid sailing and rowing warships, and 12 galleys. And he promises to double whatever Gremio offers next. It is just insane to read. They're playing a high-stakes poker game using international naval fleets, and the chips are human lives.
And Baptista accepts the bid.
Hmm?
He agrees to give Bianca to the disguised Tranio on the sole condition that his wealthy father can officially guarantee the funds.
Just business.
Exactly. The emotional state of the daughter is never mentioned once, which raises a profound analytical question about Bianca. If she exists in a society that operates strictly on this kind of transactional, surface-level performance, is Bianca actually a gentle, mild person?
Oh, that's a great question.
Or is she highly intelligent, recognizing the rules of her society, and deliberately playing the role of the submissive maiden to maximize her own value and ensure she gets the most comfortable life possible?
Oh, that is a brilliant point. Because when she isn't in public, her mask slips. In Act 3, when she is receiving a private lesson from her tutors, who, by the way, are actually disguised suitors trying to woo her, she drops the submissive act entirely.
She completely changes her tone.
She really does. She tells one of them, I am no breeching scholar in the schools. I'll not be tied to hours nor pointed times, but learn my lessons as I please myself. A breeching scholar was a young boy who could be whipped for misbehaving.
Right. She's rejecting any kind of discipline from them.
She is looking these men dead in the eye and saying, you can't punish me, I make the rules here. She is incredibly willful, but publicly, she plays the game. Katherina refuses to play the game. Katherina screams at the system, which makes her impossible to sell.
Which is exactly why the suitors need to bring in an outsider. A very specific kind of buyer who operates completely outside the emotional norms of Padua. They need a mercenary. And that brings us to the arrival of Petruchio.
Enter Petruchio. He arrives from Verona with his servant Grumio, and when his old friend Hortensio asks him what brings him to town, Petruchio doesn't hide behind romantic poetry or flowery language about finding a soulmate.
He's very practical.
He is almost aggressively blunt about his motivations. He says, Antonio, my father, is deceased, and I have thrust myself into this maze, haply to wive and thrive as best I may. He explicitly tells them, I come to wive it wealthily in Padua, if wealthily, then happily in Padua.
He is openly stating that his only metric for happiness is financial gain. And Hortensio, seeing a golden opportunity to remove the Katherina roadblock, mentions her. But Hortensio gives Petruchio a very clear warning.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
No, he says she is incredibly rich, but she is intolerable, cursed, and shrewd and froward, so beyond all measure. He admits he wouldn't marry her himself for a literal mine of gold.
But Petruchio's reaction to this warning is so telling. He completely dismisses the threat of her personality. He says, be she as foul as was Florentius's love, as old as Sibyl, and as cursed and shrewd as Socrates' Xanthippe, or worse. I come to wive it wealthily.
He's pulling out all the historical references.
Yeah, he's referencing mythology and history, Sibyl, who aged into dust, Xanthippe, who famously tortured the philosopher Socrates with her temper. He is basically saying, I don't care if she is a legendary monster. Does she have the money?
And he wastes absolutely no time. Before he even lays eyes on Katherina, he marches straight to her father, Baptista, to secure the financial contract.
Incredible.
The Baptista promises 20,000 crowns in possession on the wedding day and half his entire estate upon his death. Petruchio, in return, legally guarantees Katherina his lands and leases in widowhood if he dies first. They verbally draw up the legal covenants right there in the room. The transaction is complete. The only step remaining is for Petruchio to actually meet the product he just purchased.
And this brings us to one of the most famous scenes in the text, which is the first showdown between Petruchio and Katherina in Act 2. Baptista is sweating. He actually warns Petruchio that she is going to be incredibly difficult.
But Petruchio is ready.
Yeah, he outlines his battle plan before she even walks into the room. He says, "Where two raging fires meet together, they do consume the thing that feeds their fury." He isn't planning to absorb her anger, he is planning to overwhelm it.
When they finally meet on stage alone, it is a masterclass in aggressive verbal sparring. It is a rapid-fire duel of puns, sexual double entendres, and vicious insults. The sheer speed of the dialogue requires incredible intelligence from both characters just to keep up.
Let's look at some of this wordplay, because it is razor sharp. She tells him he is immovable. Now, immovable in this context means a piece of furniture, essentially calling him an object with no standing.
Right, a minor insult.
But then Petruchio asks, why? What's a movable? And she says, a joint stool. A joint stool was a cheap, hastily made wooden stool. So he immediately flips it and says, "Thou hast hit it. Come, sit on me." He turns her insult into a deeply crude, sexual advance.
It's very aggressive.
She fires right back, asses are made to bear, and so are you. She's calling him a beast of burden, a donkey.
Later in the exchange, he calls her a wasp, and she says, "If I be waspish, best beware my sting." He threatens to pluck her sting out. She retorts that he's a fool who wouldn't even know where her sting lies, whether in his tail or his tongue.
A hostility is just palpable.
It is. She even physically strikes him across the face at one point, and he coldly threatens to strike her back if she does it again.
But here is where we have to debate Petruchio's actual strategy. Because when she rails at him, insults him, and hits him, he doesn't just shout louder. He deploys this deeply disorienting tactic of relentless contradictory positivity.
It's fascinating to watch.
Right. When she is screaming at him, he tells her, "'Twas told me you were rough and coy and sullen, and now I find report a very liar, for thou art pleasant, gamesome, passing courteous, sweet as springtime flowers."
He is describing a person who literally does not exist in that room. Is this brilliant psychological strategy, or is he just acting like an obnoxious troll to get under her skin?
It is highly calculated psychological warfare. It is the 16th century equivalent of gaslighting. Katherina has spent her entire life dominating her environment through anger. People either cower from her or they yell back, which just fuels her fire.
That's her whole ecosystem.
Exactly. But Petruchio refuses to participate in the reality she is trying to construct. By completely ignoring her rage and praising her for a sweetness she isn't displaying, he deprives her anger of its power. He makes her primary weapon entirely useless. He essentially short-circuits her brain. And while she is still reeling from that, he pulls the ultimate power move. He unilaterally ends the negotiation. He looks at her and says, "Your father hath consented that you shall be my wife, your dowry agreed on, and will you, nill you, I will marry you."
Will you, nill you, meaning whether you will it or whether you nill it, whether you want it or not. He removes her agency completely.
And he proves it the second Baptista and the other men return to the room. Katherina is furious. She tells her father, "You have showed a tender fatherly regard to match me to a half-lunatic." She clearly and loudly states she wants nothing to do with him.
But Petruchio doesn't flinch.
Not at all. Petruchio just smiles at the men and invents a completely alternate history of what just happened behind closed doors.
He says, "Oh, you guys have it all wrong. When we are alone, she is sweet as a dove. She hung about my neck. She gave me kiss on kiss." He literally announces to the room, "We have agreed so well together that upon Sunday is the wedding day." Katherina screams, "I'll see thee hanged on Sunday first." She is vocally rejecting the premise. But it doesn't matter. Petruchio completely ignores her, tells everyone to prepare the feast, and simply leaves for Venice to buy clothes for the ceremony.
He just walks out.
Yes, he leaves her standing there, screaming into a void that absolutely no one is listening to. Her father has the contract, so her consent is irrelevant.
Which means we're locked in for a wedding. Petruchio has secured the legal ownership through the contract, but a contract doesn't change Katherina's mind. To do that, he has to completely dismantle her reality, starting with the very institution of marriage itself. And this brings us to the chaos of Act 3, the wedding day.
The wedding day begins with a profound subversion of expectations. It is Sunday, the guests are gathered, the priest is waiting, but Petruchio isn't there. He is late.
And this really affects her, doesn't it?
It does. For the very first time in the text, we see the armor crack. We see Katherina genuinely vulnerable. She is weeping, not out of rage, but out of deep public humiliation. She cries, "Now must the world point at poor Catherine, and say, Lo, there is mad Petruchio's wife. If it would please him, come and marry her." She feels the intense burning sting of being publicly abandoned.
And when Petruchio finally does arrive, it isn't a relief. It is a spectacle of absolute calculated madness. He doesn't show up in the fine clothes he supposedly went to Venice to buy. His servant, Biondello, runs in and delivers this incredibly breathless, hyper-detailed report of Petruchio's outfit and his horse.
It's a grotesque description.
It really is, and we really need to unpack the specifics here.
Biondello says Petruchio is wearing a new hat, but an old, filthy jacket, breeches that have been turned inside out 3 times to hide the wear, mismatched boots, one buckled, one laced, and an old, rusty, broken sword with a broken hilt. He has constructed a visual parody of a groom.
But the description of the horse he is riding, it is a masterpiece of horrific veterinary detail. Let me read just a piece of this, and I want you to explain to me why Shakespeare dedicates so much stage time to horse diseases.
Go for it.
Biondello says the horse is possessed with the glanders, troubled with the lampus, infected with the fashions, full of wind galls, sped with spavins, rayed with the yellows, past cure of the fives, stark spoiled with the staggers, bignon with the bots. What is this list? Like, what are glanders and spavins?
It's quite the medical chart. Glanders is a highly contagious, fatal respiratory disease in horses that causes horrific nasal discharge and skin lesions. Spavins are painful bony growths on the horse's hock joints that cause severe lameness.
This sounds awful.
It is. The staggers refers to neurological diseases that cause the horse to fall over. The bots are internal parasites, basically maggots eating the horse's stomach lining. This isn't just an ugly horse. It is a walking biological hazard. It is a corpse barely clinging to life, patched together with pack thread.
So why do this? Why negotiate a massive fortune, win the girl, and then show up riding a plague-ridden animal looking like a swamp monster? Baptista actually begs him to change into decent clothes before going into the church, but Petruchio refuses. He delivers a line that reveals the whole game. He says, "To me she's married, not unto my clothes."
That line is the thesis statement for his behavior. He is aggressively rejecting every single societal norm of Padua. He is demonstrating that his personal authority, his ownership over Katherina, supersedes all social conventions, all religious ceremonies, and all appearances.
He makes his own rules.
Exactly. He is forcing Padua to accept him on his own grotesque terms.
And he carries that destruction right into the church. We don't even get to see the wedding ceremony on stage. We only hear about it through the horrified report of Gremio, the older suitor. Gremio comes stumbling out of the church, visibly traumatized.
He's completely shaken.
Yeah, he says Petruchio was swearing so loud and so violently during the vows that the priest dropped the prayer book in shock. And when the priest stooped down to pick it up, Petruchio hit him so hard across the head that both the priest and the book went flying across the altar.
Then, during the communion portion of the ceremony, he calls for wine, chugs it down like a pirate in a tavern, and throws the soaked bread, the sops, which were meant to be eaten solemnly directly into the sexton's face, simply because he decided the sexton's beard looked too thin.
Just unhinged behavior.
Very much so. And he seals the marriage with a kiss so aggressive and loud that the entire church echoes with the smack.
Gremio literally calls him a devil, a fiend. He says Katherina is a lamb compared to him, and the madness doesn't stop at the altar. Immediately after the wedding, before the grand bridal dinner can even begin, Petruchio announces he is leaving and taking Katherina with him.
Denying him the celebration.
Right. Katherina finally tries to stand her ground. She pleads, she demands, she says, "I will not go today, no, nor tomorrow, not till I please myself." "The door is open, sir, there lies your way." She is trying to reclaim her dominance.
But Petruchio escalates the situation beyond social norms into physical threat. He draws his rusted sword. He commands his servant to draw his weapon. He falsely claims they're surrounded by thieves who are trying to steal his wife, and he essentially takes Katherina hostage in front of her own family.
Wow.
And in here, he delivers the most chilling declaration of ownership in the text. He publicly claims her as his literal property, saying, "I will be master of what is my own. She is my goods, my chattel, she is my house, my household stuff, my field, my barn, my horse, my ox, my ass, my anything."
He equates her to a barn. To an ox. So I have to push back here. We've established she wants her money, but why go to these terrifying lengths? Why assault a priest and ruin the wedding dinner? Why deliberately traumatize the woman you just married?
To understand the why, You have to look at the power dynamics he is dismantling. Katherina has always ruled her environment by being the most volatile person in the room. Her anger was her armor and her weapon.
Right. Everyone else just backed down.
Exactly. Petruchio realizes that you cannot tame a fire with a small cup of water. By acting vastly more unpredictable, violent, and chaotic than Katherina ever was, he forcefully deprives her of her primary weapon. She cannot out-crazy him.
He has to pivot.
Right? He forces her into the deeply uncomfortable position of being the reasonable one. She is suddenly the one trying to de-escalate the situation. He has constructed a new reality where he is the hurricane, and her only chance of survival is to seek shelter in the eye of his storm.
And that storm moves away from the public streets of Padua and into the deep, isolated countryside. Having legally bound her and physically removed her from her family, her wealth, and her social standing, Petruchio begins the next phase of his campaign. The text actually refers to his country estate as the Taming School.
It's an apt name.
It really is. It is a psychological boot camp designed to break down her physical and mental defenses.
The journey to this isolated house sets the tone for the deprivation to come. It is freezing cold and physically miserable. Grumio, the servant, arrives at the house ahead of them, half frozen, and reports on the journey.
And what happened on the road?
He says Katherina's horse stumbled in a miry, muddy place, pinning her beneath it in the freezing mud. And instead of rushing to help his new bride, Petruchio flew into a rage and brutally beat Grumio for letting the horse stumble. Katherina had to literally wade through the freezing mud to physically pull Petruchio off the servant, praying to him to stop.
The famous Shrew of Padua is begging for mercy for someone else.
Exactly. The shift in her behavior has already begun. But the pressure only intensifies when they arrive. They're freezing, exhausted, and starving. Petruchio unleashes absolute hell on his domestic staff.
Just creating chaos.
He screams for his slippers, he demands water, he violently strikes a servant who accidentally spills a drop from a basin. He creates an atmosphere of sheer terror.
And then the food finally arrives. It's roasted mutton. Katherina is starving. But Petruchio takes one look at this meat, declares it burnt, and throws the food, the wooden plates, the trenchers, the cups, everything, directly at the servants. He causes a riot in the dining room.
And Katherina has to manage him again.
Yes. She tries to intervene. She says, "I pray you, husband, be not so disquiet. The meat was well, if you were so contented." Again, she is forced to be the diplomat. She is pleading for reason.
But Petruchio refuses reason. He insists the meat is burnt, claims that eating burnt meat engenders anger and choler in the blood, and declares that for their own health, they will both fast for the night. He marches her off to the bedroom without letting her eat a single bite.
And when she is locked away, Petruchio comes back on stage alone and delivers a soliloquy that is incredibly chilling because it removes any doubt about his sanity. Like, he isn't actually angry.
No, it's all an act.
Right, he is cold, calculating, and fully in control. He tells the audience exactly what he is doing, and he explicitly compares Katherina to a wild bird of prey that he is training.
The terminology he uses in this speech is highly specific 16th century falconry language. He says, "My falcon now is sharp and passing empty. Until she stoops, she must not be full gorged."
What does that mean exactly?
A haggard is a wild adult hawk, notoriously aggressive and difficult to train. The established method for breaking a haggard involves exactly what Petruchio is doing, which is extreme sensory deprivation. You starve the bird and you keep it awake by constantly disturbing its perch until the sheer exhaustion forces it to submit to the falconer's will.
He outlines the playbook step by step. He says she ate no meat today and she will eat none tomorrow. She didn't sleep last night and she won't sleep tonight. He says he will find some microscopic fault with the making of the bed and fling the pillows and sheets everywhere to keep her awake.
It's systematic torture.
And the most manipulative part of this entire strategy is the justification he uses. He says he will pretend that all is done in reverent care of her. He calls it a way to kill a wife with kindness.
It is a devastatingly effective psychological loop. He is subjecting her to profound physical deprivation, but he is masking it as extreme, overprotective affection. He makes it impossible for her to fight him on the grounds of cruelty because he is constantly claiming to do it all for her benefit.
Which perfectly explains the absurdity of the famous scene with the tailor in Act 4. Katherina is at her breaking point. She is so hungry, she's literally begging Grumio for a neat's foot, which is a cow's foot or some beef and mustard, and the servant is just sadistically teasing her with the names of food before denying her.
It's really cruel.
And then Petruchio enters, bringing a master tailor with a beautiful new cap and gown he had custom ordered for her return trip to Padua.
And as soon as Katherina expresses a liking for the clothes, Petruchio's trap springs.
Yeah.
He immediately rejects them on her behalf. He looks at the cap and calls it a velvet dish, a cockle, a baby's cap, and orders the tailor to take it away.
He won't let her have anything.
Right. And Katherina finally tries to assert her own reality. She delivers this powerful defense of her right to speak her mind, saying, "My tongue will tell the anger of my heart, or else my heart, concealing it, will break." She insists she likes the cap and will have it or none.
But Petruchio doesn't even argue with her. He just completely ignores her defense and pivots his attack to the gown. He looks at this wildly expensive dress and describes it like a piece of destroyed artillery.
The language he uses is wild.
He says the sleeve is like a demi-cannon carved up like an apple tart full of ridiculous snips and slashes, and he brutally attacks the poor tailor. He calls him a thimble, a flea, a nit, a winter cricket, threatening to beat him senseless with his own measuring yard.
And again, the text reveals this is all a calculated performance. As he drives the terrified tailor out of the room, he secretly whispers to his friend Hortensio to make sure the tailor gets fully paid tomorrow.
So he's not actually mad.
Not at all. He isn't actually mad at the craftsmanship of the clothes. He is orchestrating a scenario where Katherina's desires, her opinions, and her voice are entirely irrelevant. He is proving that her reality is completely dependent on his whim.
It's total reality control. He tells her they will just have to go to her father's house in their poor ragged clothes because honor peereth in the meanest habit. He is acting like he is teaching her a moral lesson about humility. But when she points out a simple, objective fact that it is almost 2 p.m. and they won't get to Padua until supper time, he snaps the trap shut. He refuses to go at all. He declares, "It shall be what o'clock I say it is." He is demanding that she surrender her basic perception of time.
Which brings us to the climax of this entire psychological pressure cooker. The starvation, the sleep deprivation, the constant gaslighting, it all builds to a breaking point on the road back to Padua. Because it is here, in Section 6, that the text shows Katherina finally shifting her strategy.
They are on the reed, finally heading toward the comfort of her father's house. And Petruchio looks up to the sky and says, "Good Lord, how bright and goodly shines the moon." Now it is the middle of the day. Katherina, looking at the broad daylight, naturally corrects him. She says, "The moon, the sun, it is not moonlight now."
And Petruchio instantly halts the entire journey. He orders the horses to stop. He threatens to turn around and go straight back to the starvation house.
Just over one word.
Right. He says, "It shall be moon, or star, or what I list, or ere I journey to your father's house." He is demanding total, unconditional capitulation, not just to his orders, but to this version of physical reality. If he says the sky is green, she must agree.
And this is the precise moment she breaks. Or perhaps this is the moment she adapts. She looks at him and says, "Forward, I pray, since we have come so far, and be it moon or sun or what you please, and if you please to call it a rush candle, henceforth I vow it shall be so for me." She agrees to call the sun the moon. She agrees to call it a cheap rush candle if that's what he wants.
And Petruchio tests the programming immediately. He says it's the moon. She agrees. He says, "Nay, it's the sun." She agrees again, saying, "The moon changes even as your mind."
But the real test, the moment that truly reveals what is going on inside her head, comes just seconds later. They meet an old man traveling on the road. This happens to be the real Lucentio's elderly father. Petruchio walks up to this old, wrinkled man and greets him as a fresher gentlewoman. He tells Katherina to embrace this beautiful young maid.
And Katherina doesn't just agree with him this time. She leans into the performance with an intensity that is almost comical.
He really commits.
She addresses the old man, saying, "Young budding virgin, fair and fresh and sweet, whither away, or where is thy abode?" She plays the delusion so perfectly and so aggressively that Petruchio actually has to step in and stop her. He says, "I hope thou art not mad. This is a man old, wrinkled, faded, and not a maiden."
And Katherina smoothly pivots again without missing a beat, blaming her eyes for being bedazzled with the sun, the very sun they were just arguing about. So I have to ask you, and I want you listening to really ponder this. Is Katherina genuinely broken here? Has the falconry training worked and her spirit is just crushed into submission? Or has she simply figured out the cheat code to surviving Petruchio?
If you look closely at her language, especially the over-the-top way she calls the old man a young budding virgin, she is almost mocking the absurdity of Petruchio's game by outperforming him. She has realized the fundamental truth of the power dynamic she is trapped in.
Which is?
Fighting him directly gets her starved and frozen in the mud. Performing absolute theatrical agreement gets her fed and returns her to civilization.
It links perfectly back to Christopher Sly in the induction. I mean, the Lord forced Sly to believe he was a nobleman by controlling his environment and demanding a performance. Petruchio forces Katherina to agree the sun is the moon by controlling her environment. In both cases, reality is simply whatever the person with the power insists it is. Identity isn't a fixed truth. It's a costume you wear to survive the scene you are in.
And that ultimate theme of performance culminates in the final sequence of the text, which is the banquet and the wager in Act V.
Yeah.
Everyone has returned to Padua. All the intricate disguises from the marriage market have been stripped away.
The truth comes out.
Right. Lucentio reveals he secretly eloped with Bianca, abandoning the whole auction process and shocking both Baptista and his own father. Hortensio, having lost Bianca, has settled for marrying a wealthy widow.
So the dust has settled, and we have three newlywed couples sitting around a massive banquet table. Lucentio and Bianca, Hortensio and the widow, and Petruchio and Katherina. And after some tense bickering and trading insults, the women leave the room. The men are left alone at the table drinking, and they get into a deeply arrogant bragging contest about whose wife is the most obedient.
Petruchio, sensing an opportunity to monetize his psychological victory, proposes a massive wager. 100 crowns. They will each send a servant to fetch their wife. The man whose wife comes first wins the pot.
Now, 100 crowns is a huge amount of money for a casual bet. Lucentio goes first. He is supremely confident in his mild, sweet, perfectly obedient Bianca. He sends his servant to bid his mistress come, and the servant returns alone with a message: she's busy and she cannot come. Lucentio is stunned.
Then Hortensio sends for the widow, begging her to come to him. The servant returns and says she will not come. She bids you come to her. 2 for 2, the wives refuse the summons. They have the rings, they have the security. They no longer need to perform obedience.
Finally, it is Petruchio's turn. He sends Brumio. He doesn't beg, he doesn't bid. He says, "Say, I command her, come to me." And almost instantly, before the men can even process it, Katherina appears in the doorway. She asks, "What is your will, sir, that you send for me?" The other men are in absolute shock.
They can't believe it.
Baptista is so amazed by this total transformation of his toxic asset that he immediately offers to add another 20,000 crowns to her dowry, saying, "For she is changed as she had never been."
But Petruchio isn't done. He wants a full, undeniable display of his victory. He orders Katherina to go fetch the other 2 disobedient wives and drag them out by force if necessary. She complies.
She just does it.
Yes. When she brings them back, Petruchio issues a completely arbitrary command. He tells Katherina to take off her cap and throw it underfoot, simply because it doesn't become her. She pulls it off and throws it down. The other wives are horrified, calling it a foolish duty.
And this leads to the most famous and undoubtedly the most polarizing moment in the entire text. Petruchio orders Katherina to tell these headstrong women what duty they owe their husbands. And Katherina delivers the longest single speech in the play. Over 40 lines of intense, sweeping lecturing on the absolute necessity of female submission.
It is a massive rhetorical argument. Let's break down the actual logic she uses because it is comprehensive.
Yeah, let's hear it.
First, she describes a husband in near divine terms. Thy Lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign. Second, she uses an economic argument. She says the husband commits his body to painful labor by sea and land, watching the night in freezing storms, while the wife lies warm and secure at home.
So she owes him for that.
Right. Therefore, the only tribute he asks in return for this physical sacrifice is love, fair looks, and true obedience, which she calls too little payment for so great a debt.
She goes even further, employing political language. She compares a disobedient woman to a foul contending rebel and graceless traitor to her loving lord. She even points to biological essentialism to justify her argument, asking, why are our bodies soft and weak and smooth? But that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts.
She hits every angle.
She does. She concludes this massive monologue by telling the women to veil your stomachs, meaning lower your pride, and physically place their hands below their husband's foot as a token of absolute duty. She says her own hand is ready to do so, if Petruchio pleases.
And Petruchio's response is ecstatic. He yells, "Why, there's a wench! Come on and kiss me, Kate." He has won the wager, he has secured an extra 20,000 crowns from Baptista, and he has publicly proven his absolute dominance over the woman everyone said was untamable.
Okay, reading those actual words on the page today feels intensely uncomfortable. It is a massive, shocking reversal from the woman who threatened to paint Hortensio's face with his own blood in Act 1. So how are we supposed to read this total transformation? Did Petruchio win? Did he brainwash her?
If we look at it impartially, focusing purely on the structural symmetry of the text rather than modern morality, we see a brilliant, cynical commentary on the power of performance. Look at Bianca.
Okay, Bianca.
She performed the role of the quiet, obedient, highly valued maiden perfectly. She used that performance to secure a wealthy husband in the Paduan market. But the absolute second she's safely married, she drops the act entirely. When Lucentio complains about her refusal costing him 100 crowns, she snaps back, "The more fool you for laying on my duty."
She played the game, won the prize, and took off the mask. She was never submissive. She was just a better actor than Katherina.
Exactly. And then look at Katherina's trajectory. She started out publicly rebellious, which made her a target, tanked her market value, and subjected her to Petruchio's brutal taming school. She learned that fighting the system directly results in physical pain and starvation.
A hard lesson.
But she also learned that the public performance of submission is the path to peace, comfort, and ironically, power within her marriage. By delivering that speech, she gets the longest final word in the play. She publicly dominates and shames her sister, and she ensures that she and Petruchio walk away with the money and the terrified respect of the entire society.
The text doesn't necessarily dictate who is morally right in this situation, but it very clearly demonstrates who understands the mechanics of the game. Petruchio wins the bet, but Katherina gets the last word in the play. She has learned how to navigate the stage she has been forced onto by giving the audience exactly what they demand to see.
And that brings us full circle to the very heart of the text. This isn't just a simple story about taming a shrew. It is a complex exploration of identity, economics, and the roles we are forced to play to survive the systems we are burned into.
So let's summarize the journey we've taken today. We have peeled back the layers of a deeply challenging, incredibly intricate piece of source material. We started by looking at a bizarre sensory overload prank played on a drunk tinker, which taught us that reality is malleable.
Then we saw it applied to society.
We moved straight into a high-stakes transactional marriage auction in Padua, where human beings were weighed against cargo ships and oxen. We followed the mercenary Petruchio as he deployed calculated psychological tactics, starvation, sleep deprivation, and reality denial to break Katherina's resistance. And we ended with a famously polarizing speech where the former rebel performs ultimate submission to win the final game.
The text constantly asks us to examine how much of our identity is shaped by the environment we are in and how much of our behavior in relationships is just a calculated performance to get what we need, whether that is a warm bed, a wealthy spouse, or just a little bit of peace in a hostile world.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one massive, lingering mystery from the text. Something to ponder as you go about your day. Remember Christopher Sly, the drunk guy from the very beginning, the tinker who was tricked into believing he was a lord watching a play.
The man for whom this entire story of Padua was supposedly being performed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you look closely at the source material, Christopher Sly chimes in briefly at the end of Act 1, drunkenly mumbling that it's an excellent piece of work and hoping it's over soon. And then, well, he completely disappears.
He just vanishes.
The text never returns to him. Shakespeare never writes an ending for the frame narrative. We never see Sly wake up. We never see the Lord reveal the prank. We never see him go back to being a tinker.
He simply vanishes into the architecture of the play, never to be heard from again.
So ponder this. Did Christopher Sly ever wake up from the illusion? Did the Lord just leave him trapped in that fake reality forever? Or perhaps even more hauntingly, is the entire story of Katherina, Petruchio, Bianca, and the brutal transactional world of Padua just a permanent, unfinished dream trapped inside a drunken man's mind as he sleeps in the mud outside an alehouse? Next time you find yourself playing a role to meet someone else's expectations, just remember to check the stage directions. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.